Hello and greetings from India. A warm welcome to everyone at ICoN 2016. This is the second year that I'm sending a virtual presentation, and thank you so much, Dario. Thank you for all the organizers for having accepted my offer to present this way. I, it, it gives me immense pleasure to be at ICoN always, and hello to all my friends. Today I am presenting a very a topic which is very close to my heart. Um, it is about it is an experiment and a project that me and my uh, co-presenter Hriday Gami uh, are hoping will become the next big thing to improve the lives of cancer patients, particularly in India and hopefully around the world. To name an illness is to describe a certain condition of suffering, a literary act before it becomes a medical one. Unquote, Siddharth Mukherjee. There are approximately 1.8 million people living with cancer in India, with over 1 million new cases being added every year. A WHO study predicts that cancer rates will see a rise of 50% globally and approximately 15 million new cases will be added in the year 2022. Cancer is a complex illness. What makes it different from other chronic illnesses is that it affects almost every aspect of the patient's life, not only their life, but also the lives of those who surround them, the caregivers, family, friends, and co-workers. Cancer is not a monolithic illness. It presents itself in more than 150 different forms, yet we tend to perceive the illness as a unified creature. This perception exemplifies the role of language and metaphor in giving any illness its form, which spreads over time in the guise of stories. It is a difficult illness for various reasons. Firstly, it is a disease about which we understand very little till not so long ago. The explanations for the cause of cancers have ranged from imbalance of black bile in the body to the presence of viruses, from environmental toxins to cigarette smoking and obesity. Secondly, due to our fragmented knowledge of the disease and its diverse manifestations in patients, we haven't yet found a cure for it. There have been developments in the field of medicine that have helped patients manage their cancer. There are treatments that have been extremely successful in achieving full remissions in certain kinds of cancer, but on the whole, cancer has remained an elusive illness. Doctors in clinics and laboratories alike confide. Ultimately, diagnosis is one of the major problems of cancer treatment. Due to lack of awareness and insufficient diagnostic tools, except for in major cities in countries like India, the late detection of cancer is one of the hindrances in overcoming the illness. Each patient responds to cancer treatment differently, depending on the type of cancer, body type, patient's lifestyle, and nutrition. Its treatment, particularly chemotherapy and radiation, have severe side effects. The side effects of cancer treatment include disorientation, severe fatigue, abnormal weight gain or loss, severe nausea, insomnia, hair loss, skin darkening, anemia, bleeding problems, and low immunity. Cancer patients are commonly found to suffer from depression due to the long span of demanding treatment, which may last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, sometimes even longer. Through the course of the fieldwork, it became increasingly clear that a holistic approach to cancer treatment is needed. Even though doctors are able to provide adequate medical care and caregivers adequate physical care and practical support, there is a serious lack of emotional support and guidance provided to the patients. What to expect from treatment, how to keep oneself motivated, how to overcome depression, how to manage relationships. These are only some of the thoughts that need to be addressed in a structured manner. And it was after conversations with cancer patients that this need took shape in the form of this experiment or project. Cancer is an experience that calls into question who a person is and how they want to live the rest of their lives. Patients are compelled to re-evaluate their identity and establish how cancer fits into their life story. This is a challenging task for individuals whose lives are so disrupted, yet must live in a social world that remains unchanged by their experience. Patients talk about the importance of the process of reworking their lives in the context of the group. Stories provide scripts for living, especially for living through difficult times. They give structure and meaning to a life that inherently lacks both. Through the power of metaphor, stories guide us through the darkness in our own lives to that place of wholeness, resolution, and light for which we long. This is why we always tell and listen to stories. A narrative approach views problems as separate from people and assumes people as having many skills, abilities, values, commitments, beliefs, and competencies that will assist them to change their relationship with the problem influencing their lives. Narrative therapy is a method that separates the person from the problem and encourages people to rely on their own skills sets to minimize the problems that exist in their everyday lives. Throughout life, personal experiences are transformed into personal stories that are given meaning and help shape a person's identity. And narrative therapy utilizes the power of people's personal stories to discover the life and purpose of the narrator. It has always been known, says Paul Ricoeur, that life has something to do with the narrative. We speak of a life story to characterize between life and death. Ricoeur refers to an important doubt concerning the narrative and adds that despite it being part of human knowledge, it has been distanced from lived experience and confined to the realm of fiction. Critiquing this view as an oversimplified relationship between history and life, he goes on to examine the relationship between narrative and life and how it is akin to make a human life in the biological sense. Ricoeur, using the maxim of Socrates, says, "An unexamined life is not worth living." Narratives have for long been considered as important to sense making, to making sense of our lives. It is a fundamental process of human understanding. Using narrative accounts to make sense of people's lives and experiences has made significant impact in the medical field and to record accounts in life-threatening conditions such as cancer. An understanding of illness narratives can be found mostly in anthropology. Byron Good, in 1994, argued that narratives are central to the understanding of the experience of illness. Good's quest was to understand the cultural representations of illness and other questions that relate culture and illness. These questions, in an anthropological sense, raised from multiple perspectives, but in the context of illness narratives, most pertinent are the biological and social. In Good's conception and an alternative to the biomedical view, the body is subjectively experienced. For the sufferer, the body is not just a physical object or a psychological state, but an essential part of the self. The diseased body is a disordered agent of experience. It was medical anthropology that helped to understand that the well-being of humans is dependent on the well-being of each other, and that health and illness is part of the social fabric that binds all of us together. As Womack in 2010 says, the body defines our experience of selfhood, and in illness metaphorically represents our disjuncture with the world around us. Societies, as Womack says, view disease as chaotic and potentially disruptive to social order, and hence any kind of healing addresses the restoration of social order, which anthropology says can be achieved by engaging with the subjective experience of the patient, the trained experience of the medical practitioner. Anthropological interest in the mundane and informal discourse, Turner, like in the work of Turner, Manning, Bourdieu, has contributed immensely to the interest in illness narratives. Anthropologists have found that the spontaneity and groundedness in the everyday discourse contributes to the personal working out of problems at hand, be it illness or everyday annoyance. Burry describes chronic illness as introducing biographical disruption, a time in which the normal social structures and roles of reciprocity and support are disrupted. Despite the negative impact of long-term illness, Becker has shown that people confront their lives by using narratives to reconstruct their sense of social and self to mediate and articulate the disruption. Becker argues that narratives hold a potent constructive capacity that people use to restructure the idea of normalcy as they deal with their disrupted lives and selves. The term narrative implies listening to and telling or retelling stories about people and the problems in their lives. In the face of serious and sometimes potentially deadly problems, the idea of hearing or telling stories may seem a trivial pursuit. It is hard to believe that conversations can shape new realities, but they do. The bridges of meaning we build with each other help healing developments flourish instead of wither and be forgotten. Language can shape events into narratives of hope. Is it possible to make people aware of their shift in their life narratives? Various media was explored as effective means of storytelling as well as witnessing stories as part of this project. Through a brief survey of the internet, it became clear that patients and survivors are comfortable with documenting their journeys as patients or caregivers through the use of text and images. A lot of cancer patients maintain online journals or blogs and use it as a means to express themselves through their illness. Various media were explored as effective means of storytelling as well as witnessing stories as part of this project. Through a brief survey of the internet, it became clear that patients and survivors are comfortable with documenting their journeys as patients or caregivers through the use of text or images. A lot of cancer patients maintain online journals or blogs and use it as a means to express themselves through their illness. Some more creative or expressive persons also draw paintings and comics, take photographs, illustrate to document their journeys. Text and images are the primary media, and English the dominant language of expression. In a multilingual country such as India, there are various drawbacks to using image or text-based solutions. Firstly, the internet in its present form is accessed by a very small percentage of people. English, though fast catching up, is not the most widely used language of communication. Last but not the least, literacy rates in India stand at 74% and much lower than the world average of 84%. Considering our large population, a text-based solution would become exclusive to the population that can read. In addition to that, literacy rates in rural India are only 71% as compared with urban areas where it is 86%. A text-based solution would thus be biased towards the urban and the literate. This leaves us with two powerful media that have penetrated the remotest corners of the country, radio and television. Speech is the fundamental means of human communication. Even when other forms of communication such as writing, facial expressions or sign language would be equally expressive, people in all cultures persuade, inform and build relationships primarily through their speech. Audio appeared to be the most viable solution in our context. It is accessible by persons of all ages, irrespective of gender, occupation, socio-economic background, and most importantly, their geographic location. It can be accessed through a transistor, a low-end mobile phone, a smartphone, in the car, kitchen, train, and on the fields, while stationary or on the move. From the perspective of the service provider, it is a low-cost medium. It requires little infrastructure and time to document, record, process, and produce an audio episode as compared with an audio-visual episode. Audio engagement allows the listener to carry out everyday tasks with the audio forming the oral space. It is a medium that does not require the listener to hold a certain posture, unlike audio-visual, where the person is required to watch a screen, like I'm doing right now, or reading, where the person must hold up a book or a screen. As a result, audio is far less fatiguing as a medium of delivery when compared with a video. Apart from the practical and economic aspects of audio being the medium of choice, the arresting power of the medium and the effectiveness while recreating space and experience that is most striking, audio allows the patient to disconnect from their physical space and enter the oral space, where the narrator and the listener are able to share the intimacy in the oral space. The oral space is an extremely personal space, especially when accessed through headphones. It is also personal because when the narrator recreates an event or space through description and sound modulation, the imagery produced in each listener's imagination is discretely different and based on the person's past experience and visual library. The idea behind this project that we have called Tales from the Cellular Underworld is to induct patients into an oral space through an audio project that would help them disconnect from their physical space by providing stories of survivors from whose experience they may benefit. This involved collecting survivor stories, producing the audio clips, and making it available on the internet for feedback from patients, survivors, and experts. Patients' lives have suddenly taken a chaotic turn. Their worlds are disrupted and they begin to question their sense of self and how the cancer experience fits into their evolving life story, unquote. This stage consisted of research from secondary sources followed by informal, semi-structured interviews with experts like oncologists and psychologists and stakeholders like the patients, caregivers, and survivors. The interviews were conducted in person, over video conferencing, as well as over telephone. 3 oncologists, 2 psychologists, 3 survivors, and 2 caregivers were interviewed in detail. This was in addition to an intensive observation at the Buroo Cancer Institute in Guwahati, Assam, which is the largest public cancer hospital in the northeastern part in India. I would now like you to listen to a podcast recorded by my colleague Hriday. This podcast is part of a series that brings out various stories that highlight different faces of the dreaded illness, cancer. Today we are in conversation with Parin Chaudhary, who throws light onto how this illness took over his life and his efforts to overcome it. We go to his home in Sathir Bari in Assam, in the northeastern part of India, to unfold his story. Please listen.
আপুনি শুনি আছে টেলছ ফ্ৰম দ্য চেলুলাৰ আণ্ডাৰৱৰ্ল্ড, কিছু আশা আৰু নিৰাশাৰ কথা, কিছু কথা বতৰা সেইসকল ব্যক্তিৰ লগত যিয়ে কেঞ্চাৰ ৰোগত আক্ৰান্ত হৈছে। এই পডকাষ্টটো এটা ধাৰাবাহিকৰ অংশ যিয়ে কেঞ্চাৰৰ নিচিনা এটি ভয়াৱহ বেমাৰৰ বিভিন্ন স্বৰূপ ওলাই আনে। কেঞ্চাৰ, যিহক জনা যায় সকলো ৰোগৰ ৰজা বুলি। প্ৰাচীন চিকিৎসকসকলে এটি কেঞ্চাৰৰ টুকুৰাক বালিৰ তলত লুকাই থকা এটা কেঁকুৰা আৰু তাৰ ভৰিবোৰ চাৰিওফালে আগুৰি থকা ৰক্তকেশিকাৰ লগত তুলনা কৰিছিল। কেঞ্চাৰ বুলিলে আপুনি কি বুজে? এজন চুলি নথকা ব্যক্তি, এখন এক্স-ৰে বা কোনো আপোনজন? টেলছ ফ্ৰম দ্য চেলুলাৰ আণ্ডাৰৱৰ্ল্ডৰ উদ্দেশ্য হৈছে কেঞ্চাৰৰ পৰিভাষা সলনি কৰাৰ। এটি যুদ্ধ, এখন ৰণৰ পৰা এটা কেঞ্চাৰৰ লগত জীয়াই থকা বাটলৈ। কেঞ্চাৰ এটি জটিল ৰোগ যি বহুত বছৰলৈ থাকে। সেই সময়ত আমি বিভিন্ন ধৰণৰ পৰিৱৰ্তন নিজৰ দেহত আৰু জীৱনত অনুভৱ কৰিব পাৰোঁ। আজি আমি কথা পাতিম পৰাণ চৌধুৰীৰ সৈতে, যোনে আজি ক'ব কেনেকৈ এই ৰোগে তেওঁৰ জীৱনত প্ৰভাৱ পেলাইছিল আৰু কেনেকৈ তেওঁ ইয়াক অতিক্ৰম কৰিছিল। আহক আজি আমি তেওঁৰ সৰ্থেবাৰী ঘৰলৈ যাই তেওঁৰ কাহিনী শুনো।
2012 চনৰ অক্টোবৰ নৱেম্বৰ মানত মানে কি ভাতটো বাজি গৈছে খোৱাৰ সময়ত। তাৰপিছত মানে কি মই মানে গুৱাহাটীত গ'লোঁ, গুৱাহাটীত গৈ পেলাই পৰীক্ষা কৰিলোঁ। পৰীক্ষা কৰাৰ সময়ত মানে কি যিজন ডক্টৰে পৰীক্ষা কৰিছিলে তেখেতে মোৰ মানে কি ওচৰৰে মোৰ কৰি সৰু অঞ্জনজ্যোতি ভূঞা বুলি তেখেতে তাৰমানে কি মানে কি এণ্ডস্কপি কৰিলে। এণ্ডস্কপি কৰাৰ লগে লগে মানে তেখেতে মোক মানে কি নিজে মানে দেখুৱাই দিলে টিভিটোত যে দাদা আপোনাৰ কেঞ্চাৰ হৈছে বুলি। খোৱা পাইপডাল
আপোনাৰ ভাত গিলিবলৈ
দিগদাৰ হৈছিল মোৰ। তাৰপিছত মানে যেতিয়া মোক তেখেতে ক'লে মই মানে বৰ বিশেষ নাৰ্ভাছ হোৱা নাই আৰু কি। তাৰপৰা মই মানে আহিলোঁ, মানে কি দাদা আছে মোৰ গুৱাহাটীত, ভাইটি এটা মোৰ সেই সময়ত মানে কি তেজপুৰ ইউনিভাৰ্চিটিত ডক্টৰেট কৰি আছে বিটিনচি চৌধুৰী বুলি। মানে তাক ফোন কৰিলোঁ, মোৰ ভাইটি এটা দিল্লীত থাকে, তাত অপাৰেশ্যন চেষ্টা কৰিব পাৰে, তাকো ফোন কৰিলোঁ মই। তাকো মোৰ ঘৰত আহিলোঁ, আহি পেলাই মোটামুটি আপোনাৰ এসপ্তাহমানৰ ভিতৰত মোৰ অপাৰেশ্যন হৈ গৈছে। তাৰমানে মানে ডিচেম্বৰৰ আপোনাৰ মোটামুটি 26 তাৰিখ 27 তাৰিখ মানে কি মোৰ পৰীক্ষাটো হৈছিল। এনেকুৱা প্ৰপাৰ তাৰিখটো মনত নাই। ডিচেম্বৰৰ 30 তাৰিখে অপাৰেশ্যন হৈছিল মোৰ, লগে লগে অপাৰেশ্যন হৈছিল। গুৱাহাটীতে কৰিছোঁ অপাৰেশ্যনটো। অপাৰেশ্যন কৰাৰ পিছত আপোনাৰ মানে 2013 ফেব্ৰুৱাৰী মাহত মই ৰেডিয়েশ্যন দিলোঁ, 25টা ৰেডিয়েশ্যন দিলোঁ। তাৰপৰা ফেব্ৰুৱাৰী মাৰ্চত ৰেডিয়েশ্যন শেষ হ'ল। হোৱাৰ পিছত এপ্ৰিল মে' জুন জুলাই আগষ্ট মানত মই মানে কি আৰু মানে কি বৰ্ধমান তাতে পৰীক্ষা কৰি আছোঁ। পৰীক্ষা কৰি থকাৰ সময়ত মানে গলত আৰু মানে ৰিপিট পালোঁ, কেঞ্চাৰ আকৌ হৈছে এইখিনি গলত। তাৰপিছত মানে কি আপোনাৰ মানে কথাটো কৈ আছোঁ খাই থাকোঁ আৰু অসুবিধা মানে। তাৰপিছত মই এইটো অপাৰেশ্যন হৈছে তাৰমানে গলতটো এইখিনিতো মানে এইটো বিবুৰা হস্পিটেলত মই মানে অপাৰেশ্যনটো কৰিলোঁ। তাৰপিছত আপোনাৰ আগষ্ট ছেপ্টেম্বৰ অক্টোবৰ মানৰ পৰা মোৰ মানে কেম'থেৰাপি হৈছিল। 6টা কেম'থেৰাপি দিছে 2013। তাৰপৰা মানে কেম'থেৰাপিৰ পিছত অলপ অৱস্থাটো বেয়া হৈ গৈছিল, লাহে লাহে মানে ভাল পালোঁ। মোৰ ছোৱালী 3জনী। মোৰ যেতিয়া মানে অসুখটো হয় তেতিয়া মানে কি মানে বেবীটোৰ একদম সৰুটো যিটো বেবী মাত্ৰ 1 বছৰ বয়স, আৰু মানে কি এই ডাঙৰজনী এইবাৰ মেট্ৰিক দি আছে, আৰু সৰু ছোৱালীটো আপোনাৰ এই মাজুটো ছোৱালী আপোনাৰ এইবাৰ ক্লাছ 7 পালোঁ। তেতিয়া সৰু, তেতিয়া মানে মই ভাবিছিলোঁ মানে কি যে বেমাৰটো হ'লি অলপ মানে কি যে ফাইট কৰিব লাগিব, কাৰণ বেবীকেইটা মোৰ ডাঙৰ হ'ব লাগিব না।
As the illness and treatment progresses, the patient's former understanding of the world and their role in it needs re-evaluation. Telling one's story and being witness to other people's stories lends perspective to rewriting one's own life story. The realization that there is a stigma associated with cancer and that the discourse of medicine provides only a partial resource for re-evaluating and living life is an important element for the renegotiation of identity. While narrating the story, the patient is presented with an opportunity to be heard without being judged. The patient is also composing and weaving the story and giving it concrete form, which helps them witness it as listeners. As they tell their stories, it helps them to see their experiences of the illness in a more objective manner and come to terms with the way in which the illness has affected their lives and maybe changes them as a person. From this position, they can begin to uncover the person they could become. The act of stepping out of your own narrative and witnessing it as an outsider allows new possibilities to emerge. Listening to other people's stories allows the patient to recognize that they are not alone. Other people share their suffering and experiences, sometimes in varying degrees. By witnessing to other people's stories, they may discover new role models and can instill a sense of hope. As more stories are told, each individual becomes empowered and the community of storytellers becomes enriched by the diversity of the human capacity to adapt, and develop. In conclusion, the cancer counselors, believe that storytelling and narrative therapy help the patients make the transition from being in denial to accepting their illness through the stages of anger, bargaining, and depression. At the same time, they observed several shortcomings to this process of therapy. A lot of patients are unable to access the group therapy either due to the inability to find time, as therapy is considered dispensable when compared with medical treatment, or due to the distance between their homes and the hospital. Some patients live far away from hospitals and come from far off villages in India. Another issue faced in urban areas is that taking psychological help is also considered a taboo. Most importantly, the counselors are able to help patients during the therapy, typically once or twice a week, but have no way of guiding the patients outside of this domain when physical contact is lost. In addition, the lack of sufficient number of mental health professionals, one psychologist for every 4 lakh Indians, is a major obstacle in providing patients with access to these psychological services. The key insights then that provided an impetus for this audio project of Cancer Narratives were: 1. Patients and caregivers both converged on the need for a third space, free of burdens of being a cancer patient or a caregiver. Long waiting hours feel longer due to uncertainty and anxiety, resulting in a stressful experience. Knowing what to expect through treatment is of critical importance. Stories of survivors help instill hope in patients. In conclusion, I'd like to add that this project is in its nascent stage and requires a lot of field work, a lot of field data. It is possible that a lot of patients may not agree to come on board, may not want to share their stories, or may end up feeling depressed as a result of listening to other cancer narratives. But the project is hinged on a very fundamental property of the narrative, which is that it alters consciousness, and in the telling, it alters a person from within. And it is with this hope that we embarked upon this project, which we hope to practically apply in hospitals in India, and arrive at a lot more data which will help us to assess the project and move forward. We are deeply grateful to the fundamental theory of narrative that has given us the strength to move forward. So I end my presentation with the hope that in the telling and in the retelling of cancer narratives, we hope to find many new lives out there. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Bye.